Number 6. Bill Hall. In September of 2016, Texas woman Frances Hall, aged 53, was jailed for 2 years over the death of her husband, Bill. In the final 3 years of their relationship, Bill, a millionaire trucking magnate, had been having an affair with Bonnie Contreras, a former exotic dancer who was nearly 20 years younger than Frances. At some point, Contreras began taunting the latter with a plethora of messages, repeatedly insulting her and even sending clips of her and Bill being intimate. Frances eventually began to feel threatened as some of the messages reportedly included photos taken outside of her and Bill's home. On October the 10th of 2013, on a stretch of Texas Highway 1604 in San Antonio, Frances saw Contreras behind the wheel of her and Bill's family Range Rover. Following behind Contreras was Bill on his custom-made Harley-Davidson motorcycle. Frances made a U-turn in her Cadillac Escalade and began chasing after the mistress. She began ramming the Range Rover, but in the process accidentally hit 50-year-old Bill and knocked him off his motorcycle. The man sustained critical injuries from which he eventually passed away. Frances was arrested and subsequently found guilty of murder and aggravated assault, with the latter charge stemming from her hitting the car driven by Contreras. She faced a sentence of life in prison, but a jury determined that it had been a crime of sudden passion, and Frances was only sentenced to 2 years in jail on each count. Number 5. Natalie Meillet. In August of 2021, Formula One CEO Natalie Meillet was gunned down along with her mistress by her husband. The incident occurred at a house in Gouvy in the Belgian province of Luxembourg. The authorities suspected that infidelity had been the main factor, even though some sources reported that 51-year-old Meillet's husband, Franz Dubois, was aware of her extramarital affairs. It was theorized that seeing the two women in bed together had triggered his murderous rage. The couple had been married for 17 years and both had spent brief spells as race car drivers. Meillet, who began competing at the age of 33, had taken part in 7 25-hour VW Fun Cup races and reached the podium on 5 occasions, winning the event in 2006. 10 years later, she became the director for the Circuit du Spa-Francorchamps, where the Formula One Belgian Grand Prix is held. Meillet's lover, 53-year-old Anne-Laurence Dorviot, was a professor of political science and criminology at the University of Liège. Investigators determined that Dubois walked in on Meillet and Dorviot, then executed them both prior to turning the gun on himself and ending his life. Dubois phoned the police. When officers went to the home, they found the 3 lifeless bodies. Number 4. David Harris. Less than 10 years after they got married in 1992, David Harris was murdered by his wife, Clara Suarez Harris, following a confrontation sparked by his infidelity. The couple, from Friendswood, Texas, owned and operated a successful chain of dental practices. They had twin sons, and Clara became a stepmother to Lindsay, David's daughter from a previous marriage. Clara eventually came to suspect that David was being unfaithful. She hired a private detective agency to track his movements, and on July the 24th of 2002, investigators informed Clara that her husband and his mistress, his former receptionist Gail Bridges, were at the Hilton Hotel in Nassau Bay. Clara drove to the hotel and physically assaulted Bridges in the lobby before she was escorted by staff back to her Mercedes-Benz. As David and his mistress emerged from the hotel, Clara ran him over in the hotel's parking lot. Lindsay, then in her teens, was still a passenger in the Mercedes and pleaded with Clara to stop as she mowed her father down. Clara was charged with murder after David succumbed to his injuries at the scene. During her trial, one of the major focus points was whether she'd intended to harm her husband or had acted under momentary impulse in a crime of passion. Towards that end, both the prosecution and defense struggled to establish whether she'd struck David once or multiple times. Lindsay testified against Clara, and she, like other witnesses at the scene, claimed that the man had been run over 3 times, but a medical examiner could only confirm 1 tire mark on his body. A video of the scene, which was actually captured by the detective agency Clara had hired, was particularly damning, since it showed her circling the lot 3 times, but David's body wasn't clearly visible in the footage. An expert consultant for the defense argued that the turning radius of the Mercedes would have prevented her from turning sharply and running her husband over a second time. Counteracting the argument, the prosecution brought in an officer who'd been present at the scene and who pointed out a second tire mark in a police photo, the angle of which corresponded to where David's body had been. Once both sides had been heard, Clara was found guilty of murder and sentenced to 20 years in prison. She was released on parole in May of 2018. Number 3. Mary Barrett. On January the 9th of 2021, Daniel Barrett murdered his wife, 43-year-old Mary, at their home in Plymouth, Pennsylvania. The man had accused his wife, a U.S. Air Force veteran, of cheating on him and was overcome with jealous rage after she had allegedly admitted to spending time with another man. As per his subsequent police interviews, Daniel punched her in the face in front of the fireplace and then blacked out. As he regained his faculties, he remembered standing above Mary's body while wielding a pair of fire tongs. He proceeded to beat her with the tongs before grabbing a fire poker and then using it to strike her in the head repeatedly until the tool became entangled in her hair. He then took a knife and stabbed Mary in the lower back multiple times. Daniel went to the kitchen to splash water on his face, at which point he heard his dying wife making noises and gasping for air. As Mary was taking her final breaths, he dragged her to the basement, where he abandoned her until January the 10th, when he went down to cover her body with a sheet. By his own admission, Daniel contemplated taking his own life, but eventually decided to turn himself in to the authorities. He pleaded guilty to Mary's murder and was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Today's topic was requested by Michael Myers and Bal Bustos. If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comments section below. Number 2. Mona Haddadi. In February of 2022, horrific footage emerged from Iran of a man walking the streets while carrying a machete in one hand and his wife's severed head in the other. The victim was identified as Mona Haddadi, while her husband was named as Sajjad. According to media reports on the matter, Mona had fled to Turkey with another man with whom she had allegedly been having an affair. She was tracked to the country by her father, only identified as Javad, who subsequently brought her back to Iran in early February. Sajjad, who was seen grinning with satisfaction in the footage, attacked, killed and decapitated his wife in the southwestern city of Avaz with the help of his brother. The latter disposed of Mona's body, while in a gruesome display, Sajjad paraded her head on the local streets. Both men were consequently arrested, and their legal punishment remained to be determined as of the latest updates on the case. Mona's father seemingly condoned Sajjad's actions, claiming that he'd been a good husband to her and gave her the best life. He described the instances of domestic violence which he admitted had occurred between them as completely normal occurrences between a husband and wife. The chief of the State Security Force, or SSF, claimed that family differences had been the reason for the killing, which some women's rights activists postulated was the official protocol when it came to honor killings. The state-run news site Rokna was reportedly shut down for publishing the story and video at the time of the incident. There was an outpouring of shock and outrage over the killing across Iranian newspapers and social media outlets. It reignited debates over the prevalence of honor killings in the country, which, according to the Shark daily newspaper, number up to 450 annually. Number 1. Rebekah Johnson. 2 days before Thanksgiving in 2014, an Oregon man gunned down his wife after recently learning that she'd been cheating on him with his brother. A few days prior to the shooting, Raymond Johnson's father had passed away. He and his wife, 32-year-old Rebekah, were at his parents' home on November the 25th. Raymond walked in on her as she was talking to his brother and told them he knew they were sleeping together. The whole family thus learned of the affair, which had allegedly been going on for 6 months. Rebekah, Raymond, and his 17-year-old nephew, who wasn't named, then returned to the couple's Oregon City home. Rebekah soon found that a .38 caliber Taurus revolver was missing from the gun safe. She told the teen to remain inside as she went in the driveway to talk to Raymond. According to the police's findings, an argument erupted and then 2 gunshots rung out. It was determined that Raymond had pulled the trigger and fired into his own chest before shooting his wife in the head. She passed away at a local hospital the following day, but Raymond's life was saved. Family members argued that his mental health had suffered and he was constantly on pain medication following a recent car accident. He was also reportedly suffering the long-term after effects of a brain tumor from when he was in his 20s. Learning about the affair and the death of his father were events that presumably fractured what had already been a fragile mind state. Raymond pleaded guilty to manslaughter and unlawful use of a weapon under a plea agreement and was sentenced to 23 years in prison. Thanks for watching. For which famous figure, past or present, do you think you'd get a hall pass from your significant other? Let us know in the comments section below.